the difference of small incremental raises. Now, we've done some of that recently, but we had an eight-year stretch where we didn't raise, well, actually probably more than that, where we didn't raise water and wastewater rates at all, even though we had, you know, study results that said that we should have. We started raising electric rates, but then we eliminated the power cost adjustment. I mean, these are all politically motivated decisions.
Well, can you really draw that conclusion? I mean, you know, we had one person, basically David, doing the job of two people that we have now. So I mean, it could be that adding Bill to the position of, you know, director of the electric utility is what changed the course, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the council or the decisions that were made. I mean, we also had, as I recall, and at least from that seminar that you and I went to, that, you know, that computer model was fairly new, and either Gardner didn't subscribe to it, or, you know, it wasn't introduced to us or whatever, but they made it sound like we had cleaned house quite a bit because of that computer model. Is that correct?
Let me share some things, Larry. There was a director of utilities, electric. There was someone that managed electric when the council had it.
Right, but I mean, one person was doing both jobs.
No, he had an electric guy.
We had a water, wastewater, and electric. There was a,
Right. There was somebody that was a precursor to
It was
Bill.
Ken Arnold who was doing it
Ken
before.
Arnold
Okay.
did it before, right?
And then when he left, because of Keeper Cell, we lost a lot of employees for concerned about losing their jobs. Then the city hired Bill as a contractor to fill that void until the Keeper Cell.
Okay.
And so the Keeper Cell, you say, well, the council could have done it. And I'm going to challenge you on some questions myself. The council could have done it. But then again, why did the utility get up to be put on the block for sale?
I think it was to fund the intermodal. That's what, I mean.
That had nothing to do with the intermodal.
Well, I mean,
Mark Rainey was the one that brought up the sale of the electric utility, and I can guarantee you that there was no intention of
okay,
trying to fund anything.
that happened
associated
at
with
the
it
same
all.
time that Gardner had also sent out a letter or a memo asking if anyone had any extra funds laying around that got distributed because of the state had decided not to. I mean, you remember that, right?
You know, I will tell you that I talked to Mark Rainey as part of researching this subject. This was his idea to bring it forward, but he was one of the council members that voted unanimously to keep it after studying all the facts.
Right. One of which was that in order to make the electric utility more affordable, a large base of use would make production of that electricity more affordable. And at the time, there was a large industrial base users, series of users that would have come online. So I mean, that was part of the discussion, was bringing those steady users on, because that then reduces it reduces the height of the peak, basically.
Well, it improves the load factor.
Yeah.
We definitely need more commercial and business to help lower the average cost for all consumers in Gardner.
Yeah.
So, any more questions, Larry?
Well, I just go back to, though, I mean, one bad spate of governance does not.
Okay, so my question to you is, why is the water and wastewater having challenges now?
I mean, again, it was a bad spate of, city council members that made decisions that were either not, I mean, they were not giving the best information, perhaps, we don't know, by the city administrator or some other member of staff, or perhaps they were running for, election, and one of them said, this is going to kill my chances. I don't know what those particular years were going to, what the reason was, but I can tell you that, there was 100 years of electric utility management that did not have a problem, right? Or so, and 65 years.
Growth created a lot of the problems itself. But I'm going to ask you a question. Knowing what you know now, are you comfortable with the council keeping the water and wastewater and fixing the problems and resolving going forward?
I've always been comfortable. I mean,
Okay.
the problem has always been that we did not put money in the piggy bank to, you know, account for,
Agreed.
for maintenance.
Yep.
And I thought that number was $17 million, and then I read this, and it's $32 million. I don't know even where you guys got that number, but $32 million is, you know, a big difference from the $17 million that I know we discussed in the summer, in deferred maintenance on everything in the city.
It's going to take time.
So, and the only way to solve that problem, and we've had all kinds of harebrained schemes, really, from public-private partnerships to, you know, removing the authority from the council in the form of a BPU, but we've never tackled the problem, which is to reduce the expenditures at the city level and take that money and move it over to cover that deferred maintenance. I mean,
I agree.
and there's been tons of opportunities we could have done that. You know, trucks we've bought, you know, thankfully, we didn't pay for the $75,000 development plan, which we're now getting for $25,000. You know,
We're not getting,
well,
we're not getting a development
well,
plan.
Melissa said we were getting something
We're
that was
getting
better
a
than a
piece, we're
development
getting a
plan.
piece of it, we're not getting a development plan.
Okay, well,
for
regardless.
$75,000, but again, that's general fund, that's not utility fund. So.
Well, I mean, I'm sure I could find other places where we have given money. I mean, employee raises. I mean, that money could have gone to, as I've said many times, I mean, we could, you know, I mean, we could just in the expense of what it costs to run this building on the weekends with nobody in here because we can't regulate the HVAC system. That's a ridiculous recurring expense that should have been solved a long time ago. And it did not require, you know, this plan that I think was it Burns and McDonnell had, where we take on millions of dollars of debt with some paybacks in the 23-year time frame. Those are things that could be done right now, but you have to, I mean, and I think I've been pretty consistent in voting on pretty much everything that required, that is not an absolute necessity to, you know, and I've even offered several times, you know, what can we do with this money instead to pay down the deferred maintenance on the utilities? And
Are you saying that would have been a better example than the case study we performed
well, I mean, most of the case study has to do with the electric utility.
Right, but I'm saying that
and
you
you've
used
only
the case study of the electric utility to say that the city council form of governance was not effective, and therefore they deferred to an electric utility board. Are you saying this would have been a better example? I mean, your
I don't think
case
there.
fact and all that.
I guess what I'm saying is I
I
don't think the cause and effect is there based on 1 year's worth of data. When I've shown that, you know, the gas prices and the energy prices spiked twice in 2 years to the tune of, you know, 200% and 300%. So I mean, I don't know where you could draw that conclusion from the you know, from the facts as they are. And in reality, we fixed that problem.
Yeah, you keep saying that it's just a bad recent spate, and, you know, none of us, I don't see Bob Page here, or Vern, or anybody like that, so, I mean, even with all of Dave's years of service, Laura's sitting over there, though. She's been around for a long time.
Yeah, you know how long ago.
But, you know, one of the examples that we used in the presentation in the white paper is the downtown standpipe, which prescribed maintenance was supposed to be 15 to 20 years, and we didn't do it for 60. Now, that's not a recent spate. That's not 2000. That's not 1995. That's 60 years. That's a long period of time. And I don't think, and I'm not trying to fault prior councils. What I'm trying to say is that when you've got a group of people that their focus is exclusively on the utilities, they're not going to let something like that slip by and continue to slip by. And they're going to look to find more efficiencies in the manner of, you know, eliminating need to use contractors or finding specialty equipment so that we don't have to rent or use contractors or find some synergies between the workforces.
They could do that now. I mean, they come and present you know, make a proposal or a presentation,
Well,
and we vote on it.
And I would say that you're probably right there. But for what we as members of the governing body get paid, we spend an awful lot of time here. I signed up for this, okay? It's 9:10 on a Monday night. We've been going at it since 6:30, but I can tell you this is the longest conversation we've had uninterrupted about utilities in all the time that I've been coming to council meetings, and that was well before I got elected to the council. You know, could we spend all that time?
One
Yeah,
of the points,
but-
and again, this is just a snapshot, and it's just a piece. You talked about purchasing policy. Bill goes out and buys something, and then when it comes time for the board to meet, he says, I bought this. And they all nod and smile, and off they go. In our world, council puts together a request to bid. It goes out. 3 weeks later, we get answers. Takes a week and a half. They put together a council presentation. We talk about it at a work session. We ask some questions. It goes back. Comes back another week later. We talk about it at a city council meeting. And we say, no, I don't know. I don't have enough information. Go back at this. Why did you only get 2 bids? How did you get that? And so on and so forth. So what takes a phone call to a vendor and establishment and delivery based on need, about a week or 2 weeks takes, a 6 to 8 week cycle, bringing it to this body. That's not good governance. Good governance would be to say the city administrator has, $55,000, $60,000 signature authority, based on budget, based on project, based on whatever, to go out and fund. That's good governance. And then it's monitored. We won't get there. You won't get there. I mean, when we spend 45 minutes to an hour or an hour and a half talking about a truck that was approved in a budget and then not buying the truck, it's going to be very difficult to convince me that we're going to be able to make $2 million decisions on expansion, improvement, or replacement of equipment when we have the experts in place and we have a history of not listening to them.
So you think $2 million purchases should be made by a board, not the people that are elected to make those decisions?
I'm saying that the governance of
I mean, I've got extra time. If we need to get together to spend $2 million, decide how to spend $2 million, I'm okay with that.
I think one of the things
So-
to, counter what you're bringing up, you want to talk about the possibility of bad governance and political agendas and things coming into the decision-making process. The counter to that would be to look at the board as it stands right now has been a little bit insulated from the division that's been at the table now, been able to operate efficiently and continue to make decisions that drive forth the focus and operate efficiently, to remove some of those agendas from the table and to remove some of that divisiveness and allow them to make decisions promptly in the city's best interest. At the end of the day, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill's still accountable to hire us because he's, at this point, a hired employee, and everyone answers in that way, so he has to go through Mike, and then if the council needs to make decisions, they can. So we're still involved in the process, but we're allowing people to operate where they're experts at, where we may not be. And it takes away that political aspect of it and allows them to operate as a business and not driven towards a ballot and driven towards an election or carrying forth a campaign promise when it may not be in the best decision. It earned votes, but it didn't earn future successes. It only got you onto the ballot. It takes that piece out of it. So that's the counter to when you say it could be bad governance down the road. Take that part out of the equation when you put it on a board that's appointed and brings forth the opportunity to take that away. And I would only point to what we've done over the last, almost 4 years now with them in place, how divided everything has been and how inefficiently some of these meetings have ran because we can't meet in the minds, yet behind the scenes it's operated well, and it's created all these successes. As far as I've seen, and as far as I've read and everything that's come forward, very rarely do we hear a complaint where the board has made a poor decision. It's resulted in a negative impact for the city. So that's the counterpoint to what you had before, and maybe that's the reason that you consider something like this to remove the 4-year cycle of a council or the 2-year cycle, since we're on offsetting pieces where all the political agendas come into place, the consistency and the ability for them to make sound decisions without having to worry about who voted for them or who's going to vote for them the next time around, and only for the future. And that's all 20,000 people, and not only the registered voters and then the 1,300 people that cast a vote.
So then how do you address this headline? Utility Board raises franchise fee to give employees pay raise. You remember that? 2010, November 16, 2010, the Electric Utility Board decided to raise the city's franchise fee from 5% to 7%, which yielded a $260,000 infusion.
No.
And
Which didn't
No, it
happen.
didn't happen.
It didn't happen, but
It didn't
that came to
But
the
it's right.
council though,
But it came to the council,
so
but
that
it's
at the end,
That-
the
that's-
voice would have been heard, because then we
That's
still
not
got-
germane to this discussion. I mean, if we want to have
Let
a
me-
discussion about the events surrounding that, I'll be glad to sit down, and
Well,
Bill and I can, we've lived through it, Randy, we can bring him in and talk about the events that are germane to that.
It is
The
germane.
situation, no, it's not.
How do you figure that it's not? I mean, that was a different type of politics, but it was politics
But-
nonetheless.
No, it wasn't politics, it was a
the
recommendation.
board.
It was a recommendation, and it was denied by the council. You look at the board, and the board is made up of citizens of the city of Garden, just like this board.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
appointed by the council. The members, majority of the members of the board that we have today, Carol Lehman, myself, and John Shepherd, interviewed and appointed. Enough, you know, the people that we have. Mark came in when Vernon left, I believe, right? Yeah. Eric Schultz replaced.
Yep.
Yep.
Brian Bruxman.
Yeah, that's right, you replaced Brian. So, you know, there is a check and balance within that structure. The difference is, we're elected, they're appointed.
How does a citizen remove a member of a board?
Complaint, you know, I mean, that's the same process, they're appointed by the council. If the issue is significant enough, I mean, the board, you were here for the training, the board has the same compliance requirements that, you know, elected officials have with respect to, you know, liability and governance and so on. So, I mean, they'd have the same recommendation, but the you know, the focus there is they are appointed, that is true. But they're appointed by an elected body.
An elected body that right now can only remove if the mayor wants to do that first, right? Isn't that how we remove people that are appointed on boards, planning commissions? It's something the mayor initiates and council approves.
And if there's something,
So how does
if there's an action significant enough that would warrant removal, why wouldn't that action be taken?
Well, I mean, for one thing, you have to find 3 people on the council who, well, actually, first thing you have to do is re-elect a mayor that did not appoint those board members, or convince them.
Why would
the
fact that I appoint people, I mean, Larry, I'm in management, I put people in positions and take people out of positions as part of my career, that's what I do, and I'm the one that put them in,
But
and
you're
I'm the
not-
one that
I know, but
fired them as well.
You're a veteran politician, right? I mean, you would
No,
agree with that.
I've
And
been in this
and you-
role, I've been
and
in this
you've
role, but I
appointed
would
people.
not say I'm a veteran politician.
Well, how many years? 18 years, that's a veteran. That's a career. So, you know, you
It's
can,
experience, but it's not as a politician.
well, I mean, you must like it, and, you know, you're appointing people that would be very difficult for us to remove, because
Why?
in order, well, I mean, why would you turn against somebody that you originally said, council, I would like this?
Why would
What
I
can-
turn against? I mean, I don't
I mean,
understand.
that's what
before we
I'm saying. How
get
does
too
the
far
person-
down this
How
path,
does the
Yeah.
person?
I mean, has anybody, have you, Larry, has anybody up here ever wanted anybody removed from an appointed position?
If I had been on this council in 2010, when, you know, the utility board decided they wanted to give the employees of Gardner a $260,000 raise.
We voted against it.
I mean, but
It
it said.
didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
It didn't happen, Larry, we
didn't come
voted
up.
against it, so that check
No.
and balance that you're saying
Well, I mean,
fair.
according to the letter you wrote, it wasn't that you voted against it, it was that you'd already done the budget and you couldn't redo it.
No, but
Very
we
easy.
could have redone it. We discussed it as a council in a work session and said, we
we've
don't
already
want to
done, we're not gonna do it.
We don't want to do it.
And what if what if the three people here that went along with it? I mean, at least.
Then there are elected officials that voted on it.
I mean,
And
you
they can be
think-
elected,
you-
they can
you think
be voted
anybody
on.
should be making policy like that from an electric utility? I mean, honestly,
I think
is
that,
that something that comes within the,
Again,
within
that's
your
not
job
germane, that's
description?
not germane to this conversation. You're taking something that occurred out of context of the time that occurred and what was going on. The ability of this governing body still exists today to utilize excess funds that are created by our utilities to fund necessary projects. We could use utility funds, for example, to fund economic development. Why would we want to, good question, why would we want to do that? We would want to do that because economic development would be a direct benefit to the utility from which we garner those funds. So the fact that we have the ability to do that, and the fact that we didn't do that, speaks to what I would consider to be good governance.
Is that how, franchise taxes are levied? I mean, does Time Warner ever come in and say, we'd like to pay more, so that the city employees?
There is a difference, Larry.
How is that?
Gardner Energy is owned by the city.
By the city.
what, I guess, Larry, one of the benefits that we've always talked about with the utility and keeping it within Gardner is the ability to reinvest in the community if we so chose. So if not, I mean, if that's not what we wanted to do, then why wouldn't we get rid of it? I mean, why?
I'm not so sure that that's not the right answer, but if you look at the rates, and I've done, as Chris knows, we've communicated via email many times, even with.
Just you two though, right?
Yeah, just us.
Just us two.
Trust me. Chris, the only one I
Yeah.
talk to.
Go ahead and do the Open Records Act request, I don't care. Very, very careful.
But I mean, seriously, if you look at the rates for Gardner, and this is, I don't remember the snapshot here, but let's see, I got a date of, it's actually something that I think Bill gave you, and then I went back and re-looked at all the numbers, and, we're paying an effective rate of 10.8 cents per kilowatt hour. And even with the increase, this is after the increase by KCP&L, and keep in mind, all they did was minimize the advantage to heat pumps or any type of, electric heating device, because there used to be a fairly big incentive during the winter months, right, to get people to put in heat pumps so that they could compete against natural gas furnaces. But even after that, their rates are 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour, and even after the study that you did was only true for 4 summer months, and during that time, and I wrote all this down. KCP&L's base rates are 22% lower for 8 months.
If, the mayor mentioned earlier that KCP&L had a rate increase, I think a year ago. We, Gardner Energy and the Electric Utility Board, we monitor that very closely. We want our rates to be competitive with, if not lower than, the surrounding utilities. And the last study that I had performed by Greg Wilson, and he is a CPA and has done a lot of work for the city, our residential rates are lower than KCP&L's rates. We don't have any rate increases in our 5-year budget forecast right now.
And that's by virtue of the fact that natural gas prices dropped from.
Is it really?
Well, I mean,
That's your
2008.
claim, but is it really?
Well, I mean,
Maybe it's good governance on our part.
Well,
Maybe it's the productivity and efficiency.
I guess
that-
it could be. You signed contracts in 2008 when natural gas prices you know, a year later, it went from $13 to $3.
Do you know why we recently had to renegotiate our contract with OPPD?
I know.
Because this council decided not to serve the intermodal.
Okay, so
When that was given up, we lost the opportunity to increase our load factors significantly and then offer those reductions to every customer in Gardner.
Well, let me ask you this. You made a decision in 2008, right? Was it 2008, to add a lot of capacity? Was it not? Or was it 2000?
No, that capacity was added way prior to that for the intermodal.
2006, you had it, okay, so about 2006? Okay,
6 or 7.
In that time.
That was
Okay.
before me, but
Either way, I
okay.
mean, it's taken, you know, 2.5 years to build the intermodal. I mean, what kind of board makes a decision in 2006 when the documents had
It
not...
wasn't in place then.
The documents had not even been signed. I mean, in 2009...
The board didn't make that decision. The city council made that
The board was
decision.
not in
But-
place in 2006.
Larry,
It's in the presentation.
Well,
you're being argumentative. I don't know that you're striking a point that's landing with anybody. I mean, other than yourself, and I'm not trying to shut you up. You want to continue to ask questions, I've got no problem with that, but I'm not sure who you think you're going to convince here about, and about what?
I think I've made the case pretty clear. I mean, I mean, people vote us in to make big decisions. I mean, that's all we do in this chambers is decide how to spend money. And when you offload that to somebody that cannot be recalled, who cannot be voted out of office, you've given that opportunity up forever. And the other thing is, I mean, you found out for yourself, Chris, that the BPU was an integral part of the public-private partnership, which the mayor has promoted since about 2 weeks after we raised our hands and became members of this council, right? And that's something I don't believe you're necessarily in favor of. But are you willing to give away the decision-making authority for that public-private partnership to a board of people that the mayor initially says, here's the group of people, and then all we get to do is confirm them? I mean, are you really, that's a 30-year commitment. How do people get those people off?
Actually, I can answer that too, because it's, if we form a board of public utility, and we continue to look at the mayor's public-private partnership plan, which I'm not in favor of, you know, because we're going to, in that particular plan, we would enter into a long-term financing agreement. That is incurring debt, which you know, financed debt, which we would, you know, it
can't be debt, right? Because cash basis law says you can't obligate. I mean, it's a.
Again, that's not germane to this
But-
discussion, but
But yeah, if they want to spend money that's going to, you know, for utility bonds or the like, that has to get approved by council.
Well, but here's the problem. Once you obligate yourself to a $65 to $75 million cash infusion by a group that's appointed by the mayor, you have no choice. That's what they want, and that's why Moody's
First off,
loves.
the cash infusion, you know, you're starting to drift again. The cash infusion is variable. It's not a requirement. It was an option that was presented. The board is not a requirement. It was an option that was presented. And that's all they are options for discussion. Knowing that there was an inclination for board governance, that was the direction that went from the standpoint of the presentation. Nothing more. You know, from a P3 perspective, they're more than happy to have the council be the governance. Doesn't matter to them. That's not relevant. This is a discussion on governance of our utilities, regardless of where they sit, whether they sit wholly and completely with the city of Gardner or in a concession agreement with a private provider. regardless, that's a discussion, it's governance.
May I just share one point, Mayor? I spent almost 35 years at Kansas City Power and Light Company in the operating side of that business. And when the city hired me as a contractor to come out and run this utility, I was working for Mr. Green, and I was shocked by the difficulty in being able to purchase things. And I'll give you one example. We had a leaking transformer at Price Chopper. That's a very large transformer. That's a very important customer of this city, and we did not have a spare transformer. And I went to Dave, who went to, at that time, Stuart Fairburn, the city administrator, and I said, we don't know how much longer this transformer is going to last, and we don't have a spare. And my answer was, it's got to go to the council. So what if we had lost that transformer?
Well, now you have a policy, and you probably should have had a policy then, to have transformers already purchased, right?
I have a spare now.
Okay, well,
But I can
you could have done that.
That's a
back then.
$25,000 transformer.
Well, that's nothing.
That's
compared
more
to-
than the city administrator can authorize right now.
Well, then.
And I can purchase that.
Right, and you could have done that 2 years before, or a year before, however long a transformer lasts in storage. You could have done that and made that part of the budget, right? I mean, we just.
I don't know.
We replaced two
You make-
control boards.
You're making
that weren't even
assumptions
bad.
that the council would approve that. I don't know.
You know, again, I don't know, I can't speak for the past council that I would have not have voted for, most of them, but, that made these decisions, but, I can tell you that I'm not going to let that kind of stuff happen. I mean, that's because I don't live my own personal life like that. I mean,
You know, I would not have hired on if it had stayed the way it was when I got here, without a board, because I don't know, and I know you're telling us that you would do a good job of governing it, but what about the next person that gets elected? And then what do we do?
and what if the people on the board are constantly...
You can take care of that.
No, I can't.
Sure
That's
you
just
can.
it. I have to...
You have
I
to
somehow-
approve his
It's got to
appointments.
be approved by a majority of the council.
My question, I guess, to that specific case is if we were to sit in a work session and you were to bring up the topic, I have an issue with this gentleman that's sitting on the board, this woman that's sitting on the board, I want this issue addressed, and if the mayor were saying, no, I refuse to acknowledge that, that's a bigger issue. And then that creates a whole other world of pain and other things that would have to be considered. But until that's happened, then I think you're just asking the question to drive a wedge where there doesn't need to be a wedge driven.
No, I'm trying to be accountable to the people who believe that we are here spending their money wisely.
Well, let's speak to those individuals.
Why?
Okay, so since the board's been in place since 2000,
Yeah, Lee.
Mark?
since 2008, how many times has a
Are they
complaint
elected?
come?
I didn't know.
They're the
They're not
people we
elected, but they're
represent.
residents.
There's-
that
How many
took the
times in
time to do
those
this.
4 years has a complaint come to the council, to city staff, to the members of the board that said, I do not approve of the purchase that you just made and the way that you ran the board? How many times has that happened? I'm asking anyone, Dave, you've been here longer. I've read the headlines, so that's the part I know. I don't remember ever seeing anything where a resident has sent in an article or spoke before the board that said, I think the BPU's ran inofficially. I can't believe they made this purchase, and where was the council to protect me? Has that happened?
You know what, I mean, leadership is planning for the worst situation. And the worst situation,
and they
the
do
worst
that.
possible, the people that want us here, want us to look, to look into the future and say, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen?
But the people
And-
haven't
and-
shown
and
up to
so-
ask us to
And so we're not
change
here
ways.
we're not here to say how many people have already done it. Hey, we just changed, we're thinking about changing an entire, ordinance and creating a variance on three people who voiced a complaint about a street. So, that's a small deal. And I guess what I'm telling you is, we're here to say, what is the worst thing that could possibly happen? And really, that prior councils did not do that, right? I mean, this chart is evidence
The
of
current
that.
councils, we talked about having a lightning arrestor for the worst possible case, and the council said no to
Yeah,
that.
right.
We budgeted a truck for the worst possible case in the snowstorm.
And have you had to
And the
use
council
them?
said no. It hasn't snowed lately.
Well, I mean, you could say that about everything, right?
But
There's
let's
a-
not, you can't say worst case and then not prove it.
We're operating in a world of hypotheticals
Bottom-
moving
bottom-
forward, so it always is you can say that about anything, because it's a hypothetical.
Bottom line, every 2 years, people get to remove a person that does a bad job, and that is taken away from them in a board-like environment, especially in a city where economic development is, apparently the most important thing in the city. And we've heard it over and over again, and I guarantee you, we've heard that, you know, we can, if we have a utility, that we can, change the rates so that we can incur economic development. Well, then, what you really mean by that is that the citizens are going to subsidize the future growth of an industrial, company, or an industrial, another warehouse. I mean, I don't think that's the right way. I mean, the whole point.
Actually,
not
I think
what
with
we're
the
saying at all.
utility, it's an opposite. I think with the utility, the higher end users subsidize the residents to
Well,
make rates
right.
lower.
You can't guarantee that, though, can you? Because
They
the
do it
board,
with the electric. We're not doing it with water and wastewater because everybody's on the same rate, because nobody's bothered to take the
No, I-
time to relook at
no,
commercial rates versus residential rates.
No, I think the presentation said that we've subsidized businesses with low water and wastewater rates, right? Wasn't that what you said?
Everybody's the same rate, Jim, right?
Subsidized.
Everybody.
You subsidize
The
it.
school district, our biggest user, pays the same rate as a residential customer.
But what about industrial users?
And
No.
water?
Same rate. Everybody's
Well,
the same on water
and-
and wastewater, everybody.
Says city has fostered rate subsidies between water and wastewater. What,
That's the point.
What-
That's
I don't
what that
know.
means.
We haven't done anything. Everybody's the same. Which is,
You mean-
for
no,
all, for
I've
as important
I've seen the
as,
rates, that the more you use, as a commercial customer, the lower the rate. Am I wrong, or if I,
That's
Okay,
only,
that's
that's only for
subsidized.
users over 40.
well, 40,000, I don't use
Go ahead.
40,000 a month. I mean,
Jim, help us.
Larry, you are correct in that when you go over 40,000 gallons of use, the rate does
Per
go
what?
down
per month? Okay, well, I
It
mean,
does go down to 360.
well, who would use
But it
it?
does that for anyone, and this biggest user of that takes the biggest benefit from it is the school district. Now, we have a couple other users, not a lot of them go over 40,000, but the average commercial use is 70,000 gallons a month, which is over the 40,000.
Don't we, what do we charge New Century, which they resell to their industrial users?
New Century is a bulk user.
Right.
And they purchase for that whole area, and currently we're charging them $250, which is the cost of production plus a little bit.
Versus what do I pay again per thousand?
I think it's $465 or $480.
It's almost 100% more than a commercial user.
And those are, the additional is to pay debt service, which New Century hasn't incurred, so they're not responsible for it. That's the only instance of that type. All the other industrial and commercial users do pay the same rate. And yes, it is lower than the residential because they're using more water. And the reason that would be the case, although it shouldn't be quite as low as it is because that levels out our production rate. So it has a benefit to using the higher user.
So Jim, on wholesale on our contracts from Hillsdale, when we use more for that customer, do we pay less to them?
When we pay from Hillsdale, we pay the same amount regardless of how much water we use, it's the same. So that is a fixed cost.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how we should be structured from a rate perspective?
Most other utilities in the water around the state have a different structure. They make it incremental as far as the amount that you use, and starts out for commercial users at a lower rate to begin with. And it does vary for a government use, such as what the city uses itself, a different rate in other utilities for commercial, and then a third rate for residential. And in our case, we have another rate, not the commercial, but essentially a school and commercial rate.
But you can see how if somebody really wanted to develop warehousing in the freight district that we've just been presented with,
Mhm.
that, if somebody that was really excited about that on a board said, well, let's lower that rate so we can attract that commercial development. Then the next thing you know, we're right back where we are with the wastewater treatment plant, that we're looking at sharing with Edgerton. I mean,
Well, that's the argument that you're making that is exactly opposite that. If you follow that argument to its logical conclusion, you would be in favor of a utility board. because the utility board would have no reason to do that. This board might,
Well, I mean,
because you need economic
I guess
development
I
for
don't
a reason.
understand. How do you, what is the difference between a person
You're
that's
developing
elected?
a hypothetical that may or may not exist based
Mhm.
on assumptions that are random and, you know, I mean, you're saying, what if? What if we decided that we would, not charge any property tax for the next, 6 warehouses that came in, and not only would we give them electricity, but, we would pay them a use fee every
I
month.
vote no, just for the record.
Well, you almost,
Yeah, I mean, but that's essentially what you're saying, you say, what if? Until we get to that point, we don't know what the answer is.
you almost
The fact
did.
remains that it is true, that drove the decision to keep the electric utility was based on what McPherson, Kansas came in here and presented, and the city administrator from Newton, Kansas came in here and presented and said that your municipal utility, electric utility, will be affordable and will be a benefit to your citizens at the point that you begin bringing on large industrial users. That's what they said. That's what the KMUs told us. That's what that.
But
Beyond any, that is exactly what they said. And every council member on here said, "Oh my, well that's a good idea because we've got a 1,200 acre industrial user that's coming online." Now granted, there were 2 council members that said, "Man, we really don't want a pro-intermodal council to have a little extra cash." You know, if you want to get into the politics, if you want to get into...
3 of them.
There were 2. There were 2.
For which decision?
Keeper
On the keeper cell, there were 2 council members that didn't want to take the chance of having that extra cash be used for economic development. And so, anyway,
Yeah.
that's what occurred. That's what occurred at the time, and we don't have the load. We're looking to try and increase that load, and if we had a developer that come in that said, "I'd like to put a load in," there's a reason why the board decided to move the line across the highway, to be able to provide electricity for someone that chose to develop that.
Mayor,
So, yes, sir.
if we could get back to the point on this thing, what the committee is trying to say is that there are a number of reasons why they think it's a good idea. One of those is that it would remove the politics from the decision-making process that, you know, you just mentioned, that one. So, another reason is
You
that they
call
would
it
have...
politics, I call it oversight, but go ahead.
Okay.
Whatever. Another reason that it might be a good idea to have a particular utility board is that they would have more time to focus on just the utilities, and that's another issue from the paper they presented.
We could have a committee that does that off the council, could we not?
It's possible. You know, there are other ways that you might be able to address it, but those are the two of the issues that they've thrown out. And there are a couple of others, but those are the 2 main ones that are in favor of doing it, is that time from this board is a real precious commodity. And this is one of the longest discussions that we've had about any of that. And having a board whose focus is only on those 3 is an advantage. And then removing it from the political aspect, because this board is going to be running for re-election, and sorry, but, you know, that's a fact. And so you're going to want to try and hold rates down, and that's what historically this council and, you know, all the way back through, as far as you can look back in the history, has wanted to do, and everybody would like to do that. But the things that we haven't been doing is looking long-term, which is one of the third items that this committee is recommending, is that by having that focus, you can do much more long-term planning. This board is real lucky if you can look one year down the road at the next year's budget and 5 at the CIP. And don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for the utility committee. I'm just saying, you know, this is what they've said.
Yeah, what you would advocate for is better management or better governance. You would agree that when you present an idea about raising rates in 2002, that should have been implemented.
Or when you
It might have-
present ideas.
Let me interrupt, Jim, because
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's fair for you to try to answer a question
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
You know, I think we're at a
Yeah.
point of
Can I make a couple?
swimming, so
Yeah.
I think we need to kind of talk about what are next steps
Yeah,
regarding this.
I do want to make a quick point. I mean, and we're in Johnson County, and it doesn't really matter if it's Leawood, or Mission, or Lenexa, or most of the other cities in between. You know, these are all cities that don't have a say in their electric utility. They don't have a say in their water utility. They don't have a say in their wastewater utility. They get what is brought to them by the investor-owned utilities, okay? And those cities get a franchise fee not to exceed 5%, okay? Which makes those cities, disciplined to work inside those structures, knowing what they're going to get, being able to plan on what they're going to get for their franchise fees from electric and water and wastewater. Some of them get better deals than we do. I mean, shoot, if we could tap into Water One and tap into Johnson County wastewater, the rates are lower. But I believe you reached out to them, and they're not really ready to come and let us tap in. And if they did let us tap in, it'd be at a lot greater cost than what they're currently offering to their current customers. This is, we set up a board like this, they take and put exclusive time to the subject. They develop expertise over time. They provide the city money in the form of franchise fees, which, and if they establish rates for reserve funds like the Electric Utility Board has, when those are full, then it's a matter of, do we give, breaks to the ratepayers?
Which they did not, the last time they had that opportunity. They gave $260,000, or tried.
That wasn't an either or.
Why, how do you
It was
figure?
not an
If they
either
have-
or, Larry. It wasn't an either or, it just
The
wasn't.
$260 is gonna come out of our funds either
Yes.
way.
Well, my suggestion is, at this point, I know, and Dave, I'd like to speak to you about it. You were here the last time around. If I understand it correctly, KMU and the people from McPherson came in and they made a presentation, and the next week at the council meeting, the council took action, probably in the form of a resolution saying that we're going to form an electric utility board.
Yeah, following the presentation, we had a work session. At the work session, it came out that there was really not an interest in going forward with a sale. After that, the council came back and did make a formal decision to keep the utility, and in that directed staff to establish a means for development of a board to govern the electric utility. And then, obviously, it took some number of
Couple
weeks
months,
to
yeah.
research and write but then it was in, January of 2009, Bill, when the board, Brandy,
February.
Lance, was it February 2009?
Yeah.
February 2009. So, that's how it progressed. So, it took a few months to get there, but that was it, and the,
But it started with a resolution. Ordinance.
Either way.
yeah, and there was,
In August.
and that ordinance is changeable. It's not, you know, I mean, there's nothing that says that ordinance has to remain in its present form going forward. It's certainly modifiable, just like any other ordinance that we have.
Well,
So as far as next steps, I mean, I think if the next step was Monday, we want to say, okay, we want to vote. City staff, we want you to go figure out how to organize this and make this happen. Could that, I mean, what is that? Is that a resolution? Is that an ordinance? Is that just a go
I think
do it
now
and come back
that's-
with a recommendation?
I think now, if we provide direction to staff to develop a means of board governance for all utilities and come back with recommendations, that's what they would do. I don't think we need a formal action, a formal vote to say that's what we're going to do. I think without knowing what that governance would look like from a, and the reason I say without going to a vote, this current board governs electric. We have Lance, we have Eric Schultz, and we have Bill Krachek. So we've got three individuals that are, whose day jobs
yeah,
are associated with production of electricity.
sure.
To bring in water and wastewater from
That's
that
gonna take
perspective,
time.
I think,
And-
yeah, you know, we just need to look at how that governs, because I don't, you know, Bill knows that water pumps use electricity, but beyond that, I don't think you've got, you know.
What I'm going to suggest is, because I was under the impression that in 2008, in August, there was some kind of resolution or ordinance saying, we are going to establish an electric utility board. Now, then the process of getting it all set up, and then it was voted on in November, and they started doing business in February of 2009. So, it seemed like the first step happened after the work session, like the work session we're having this evening, where there was, whether it was a resolution or an ordinance saying we're going to establish a board of public utility.
The vote was keep or sell.
Okay.
That was the vote that took place at the council meeting.
Okay.
And the vote was to keep, and there was a decision that if the decision was to keep, then that utility would be governed under a board. And so staff at that point then began researching and said, okay, this is what we need to do, this is how we need to do it, we need to establish an ordinance, we need to define powers, et cetera, et cetera. And then that came back, and that's what was discussed, and that's what we then passed as an ordinance for that governance. So we have an ordinance
I remember that.
for governance. What we need to understand is what is necessary, assuming council wants to move in
Well,
that
and
direction, yeah, what's necessary to establish that. Now, you know, if we want to have a formal vote Monday to say, yes, do, you know,
Well,
do we direct the city administrator to establish a project, et cetera, we can do that.
well, and I guess the first thing that I'd say is, you know, do we have a consensus on wanting to move forward on it? Because we could put it behind us on Monday. I mean, Larry, maybe we don't vote to do this. Maybe the rest of us do vote to do this.
I have a sense
We
that
shall
Larry
see.
might be opposed.
I will probably be opposed. I will definitely give us some due diligence
Okay.
this weekend, though.
But, yeah, I would like to, if the majority of council that's here would like to move forward with it, I mean, I would like to see some kind of resolution stating that we're moving towards a board of public utility that will establish by ordinance at the time that staff.
Well, let's let the legal
and,
say whether it's a resolution or council action, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, because the only thing that I want to make sure, as we're doing that, because one thing that we've talked about that could be a concern is we have a group of employees right now that kind of are in between water, doing the line maintenance, and supporting public works. So what we don't want to do is say we're going to move this group, and now all of a sudden we need 10 people over in public works to do that job. So I would like to understand organizationally what that's going to look like before, I mean, So as long as whatever we do on Monday isn't like 100% binding until we can review what that's gonna look like, and I know, I've had conversations with Laura just about, overall fund, all that stuff needs to be ironed out, and we need to feel comfortable with the employee aspect of it, so that we're not adding additional costs into the business.
I think a simple vote, not needing a resolution or an ordinance at this point in time, to direct staff to pursue investigating this, which could result in an ordinance that would change the governance, would be sufficient. I don't think we need to draw up, it's gonna take time, because obviously there's some complicating factors. We have to get to the legals, as you said, and work these things out to make sure that it's handled properly. But I think a simple vote, just to direct staff to do the exploration and to come back in a period of time, provide you with all the necessary information and a sample ordinance and a structure and how this would work, would be sufficient to guide us to do that, because that is a vote of the council, of the governing body.
And then we would have the answer as far as who's in favor of at least pursuing going the next step.
So we don't have to take consent of the council tonight, we can just have.
We just have
we
a
just
vote on
Monday.
Monday. So.
I think it's best to have
And
all
Brian
5
will be
individuals
there
here
too as
too,
well,
yeah.
so.
This is a pretty monumental shift that you wanna have.
Oh, well, we can't take any binding action tonight anyway, but, we do have enough to make a majority.
To say, do the work, but really the only work between now and Monday is to modify the agenda and add a CAF, right? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Lee.
You put your suit back in the bag in the back of the closet, right?
Might have a wedding to go to.
You never know. All right.
Can I ask, we can ask questions?
We don't usually
Oh,
need to talk to staff about something.
Well, I just had a quick question.
Okay.
What is the next step on healthcare? Because I feel like that's kind of still, we talked about in July, we budgeted this amount, but at that same time, we also said we were going to pursue, exploring some options to come back prior to actually having to vote on the new, whatever. I think we vote, April, May, on the new. So, I guess I just don't feel like we've got all that, in a pretty.
You actually don't have anything.
Right, so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, tomorrow, I attend the benefit advisory meeting at NPR tomorrow. That's where we will learn about rates, what the structures are, looking at the PPOs, the things that they talked about tonight. I've not seen any of that. We're going to learn all about that tomorrow. So after that, I think the fast track starts with what are we going to do for this year.
Okay,
But
thank
yeah,
you.
we were kind of waiting to get that piece because it was very hard to try to move forward, Christie, without knowing what we even had that would be available for us.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So what will you do then after you go, you'll create a committee, is that what you're saying?
Well,
That's what,
my,
that's what was promised back in July.
well, that's what we did talk about, that's correct. I don't have that answer on exactly how we'll move forward. Let me get the information and we'll come back and visit with you all about that.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Out of here before 10.
Okay, so
Okay. Margaret, Frank.
yeah.
How are you?
Oh, okay. How was your meeting tonight?
Yeah.
Right.
You're free.